Hello guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're back on the Ford Mustang engine. Stay tuned. So earlier today we wrapped up the first part of this series. Basically removed that piston. It was completely stuck in there. We managed to get it out. We inspected the piston. The piston was cracked. We have some parts at the back there and we have these parts over here. That is the original piston taken out of the engine. If you want to catch the first part, I'll leave a link up above. This is an early 1961 Ford Falcon engine. People do put these in the Mustangs, of course, and when this came to the UK, this was in a Ford Mustang. So I haven't yet decided exactly the fate of this engine, but what I do know is that we need to strip it right down to the bare block. Probably should state this isn't a tutorial. This is the first time I've ever done this, so I'm by no means telling you guys how to do this. This is just me learning as I go. I'll take the water pump, the harmonic balancer, and remove the crank. But let's flip the engine round and get these parts off first. I have a puller tool, but I think the bolts that kill my kit are the wrong size. This is too big. That is too big and wrong thread. Great. I'm pretty sure that this is well and truly overkill, but this should work. It could break the harmonic balancer, but this is junk. As you can see, the front is ruined, so let's give this a go. So as you can see, that is junk, but it's off. This here is a kit for removing harmonic balances, and every bolt doesn't fit. I suspect this bolt will break off. Oh wow, it's a bit rusty. Chain slop. What would you guys say about that? So what about all this? Is that something you would try to repair? would the machine shop be able to get rid of all that? It looks pretty severe. If you came across this, would this mean the block is no good? Had to get a little creative, but it got the job done. Camshaft is out and the lifters are also out. So I think we'll flip this and get the crank out. And every time I rotate the engine, I get all this rust just falling out like it's snowing, so that is not ideal. So it's been about 2 weeks since we did any work on this block. The last thing I did was clean it out, and it's been drying out, it's back in the garage, and this is what we have. After a heated pressure washer, the inside of the block looks to be a little bit better. It's by no means perfect. The deck cleaned up really nice, but I did come across this guy here. So basically, using the light to test if the block is flat, obviously you need a bigger piece of steel than this. If we go to the back, can you see that big gap? Basically the head bolt going through here was rusted. In the first part, when we removed this, it was quite rusty. This is the bolt that was removed. There's weld on the top. So maybe it's been a rush job, maybe they've just welded it, put the head gasket on and just hope for the best maybe. I can't see any damage on the side of the block. So I'm guessing they've repaired it, filled it, and then re-tapped it and possibly that is now cracked again, and water is getting through the threads, which is the reason why this bolt was all corroded. The bolt should look like this. This is what all the rest of the head bolts look like. Unfortunately, this and this bit of weld here, I think it's going to be the end of this block. The block itself cleaned up quite nice, and it is a shame, but this is an early 60s block. This is the 4 main, not the 7 main. If this was a 7 main and not a 4 main, I possibly may take it to a machine shop and get their advice and see if they can repair this once again. If the blocks seem to be okay, I probably would try this myself, get myself a plastic tub, and in the spring take it outside, hook up a battery charger and some bits of metal, a bit of electrolysis going on, and that'll be a nice little project. As irritating as this is, I think this is the end of the block, guys. The block is actually pretty decent. It's only really that bit of weld at the top that's really thrown me off. The rest I could probably work with, but that, I think that's a no-go, guys. I think I'm just basically diving right into a money pit with this. Obviously, bearings need to be replaced, and they're not too bad, but this is basically the camshaft bearing, and this one here has a massive chunk missing from it. That's not from myself. That has been done during installation, so whoever has put this cam in has been quite rough and aggressive, and they've actually managed to take quite a big chunk of the bearing out. The crank is actually in really good condition. There's some very light scoring on the journals, but I mean that would polish out. So the main bearings, the crank bearings, seem okay. There's not a great deal of wear, but there is some wear obviously, but not, it hasn't overheated, it hasn't run out of oil, it's just general wear. The water pump does not look too clever. That is definitely junk. The harmonic balancer is also junk. So this is the piston that gave me a headache. I had to smash it out basically. I've cracked the piston, cracked the rings. Removing the rod end cap should be an easy process, but as you can see, I can't even get it off. But this one should come straight off. So that coming off like that is a sign of a good quality rod. The fact that that is stuck on there means something is twisted, misshapen. It's basically junk. The bearings themselves, well, the brass has been worn through, they've overheated, and the heat is transferred through the bearings into the rod, which, yeah, this is the whole entire, all this here is just complete junk. The bearings have not spun, they've just overheated and perished. They didn't crack, well, they haven't cracked in the engine, they've cracked because of me trying to get this piston out. So this is the end cap of the good piston, and you can actually still see machine marks in the end cap. Can you see them? The cross hatching. Has this been rebuilt? I wouldn't say recently, but has this been rebuilt and it's just been a bad rebuild, and that's why the engine's failed again? The lifters seem perfectly fine. They don't look worn or mushroomed or anything like that. They actually seem really decent. You can probably hear the ultrasonic heating up in the background. That's my next job this afternoon. The heating has failed in the house, so I'll be fitting that later on today. So it's all together. It's fairly clean, it's manageable. You can move stuff around now and not worry about oil spilling everywhere, such as the sump. The sump was completely gunked up, and just wanted to make sure nothing would fall in there and get coated, or this would tip over and leak on the floor. We've covered the block. The block needs a lot of work. It definitely needs to go up machine shop, and this needs to be looked into, probably x-rayed to make sure there's no fractures, as the rust in that bolt thread is a bit alarming. I don't trust that at all. The crank is good. It's actually really clean. A quick buff and I think that'll be ready to go. As we know, piston 6 is completely shot. These have all been in the ultrasonic cleaner. Just 15 minutes, get the thick off, like I say, so I can manage them, so I can store them. All the bearings, obviously a junk, you wouldn't reuse the bearings. Water pump's junk, but that's nothing new there. They pretty much always fail, along with the thermostat. It's always best to replace them anyway. Fuel pump, no idea if the fuel pump actually works. Probably not. The diaphragm inside is probably rotted and perished, so that'll probably need to be replaced if I was to reuse this. The main caps are decent, there's nothing wrong with them. They're not twisted, not buckled. The bearings aren't too bad. They've got signs of wear, but nothing alarming, so they seem to be perfectly fine. Obviously I would replace these, I wouldn't reuse these ones. Timing chain cover cleaned up quite nicely. Obviously it needs a thorough clean, but I just wanted to see if it was cracked or damaged, and that seems okay. The crank and the pistons themselves are in pretty decent condition. Even the bearings aren't too bad, but this is well past it, so this was probably not replaced on the last rebuild. Not really looked much into this, but I have inspected it. It hasn't got hardened seats on the exhaust side, so if it has been rebuilt, I haven't replaced the seats on the head. Not inspected the carb. I was going to pull this off and strip it down, but it's cracked. It's broken here, and this is pretty much junk. You could probably fix it, you could probably weld it, I guess. If this ever gets put back together, it's going to get a new carb. I've cleaned the lifters and the rods up, and I don't know why, because I wouldn't reuse these, but I just thought it'd be nice to clean them up, keep them together. They're not sunken in, they're not mushroomed, they're in pretty decent nick. The back of the engine is here, and this is piston 6, so all these and the crank all line up with a block. These rods and lifters all line up with a block. The main bearing caps, these all line up with a block. Camshaft lines up. You're probably looking at the head and thinking, that's not right. Yeah, the head is backwards, that should be the other way around, but with the carb being on the top and at the back, it's out the way. If I flip this around, the carb's kind of hanging out over the front here and it's in the way, so I've just turned this around, but everything other than the head is in line. So where does this leave us with the build? I could go out and buy the parts. That is definitely an option. It would cost a lot, at least £1,000, maybe more, probably more. Or I could part this out, or I could store this, search around. At some point there'd be someone selling possibly a very similar or even the same engine with possibly a different issue. Maybe the top end's gone. That engine may come with a flywheel, it may come with plugs, it may come with wires, it may actually come with a lot of other items that I need, plus a healthy block possibly, or healthy pistons. Out of the three options, option 2 would be financially the best for myself, because these parts, they're not that cheap to buy. There is some good money to be made by selling these parts separately, especially now they're all apart and cleaned up. There's the first option of spending a fortune on parts. That doesn't really seem like a good option in my opinion. What I'll be doing with all this is storing this. Now the reason why it's all on the bench, all cleaned up and in sections, I'm going to pack all this up into separate boxes. I'm going to soak it all down with WD-40. Stuff that needs to be will be wrapped in cling film. Nuts and bolts will be all put into bags and basically stored. And one day we can come back to this and hopefully take 2 and make 1. I know it's not what you guys want, and it's not what I want. I would love to just carry on with this and just build it, but unfortunately due to costs it's just not feasible. This will be back on the channel at a later date, but for the time being guys, we're going to wrap this one up here. There's not really much more I can do other than pack this all away and store it. So like always, please like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one.